Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to have a chat to you about hosting and how that affects your rankings. I'm Terrence, I'm from MessageForce. It's my job to spend a few minutes of my day as often as I can to just give you guys as much knowledge as I could possibly give you around SEO, things that you can do to improve your rankings and to minimize your risk in ranking sites as well. So today's topic again is on good hosting or hosting and how that could affect your website and its rankings. So you can see on the screen here these are the things I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about where your servers are located, how that makes a difference, the locations that you're targeting in general. This concept of neighborhood, I'll get into that in a moment. How server consistency and settings are important as well, so that's important. And availability at uptime. So, and again, just before I run out of time, because I found I keep running out of times at the end of my segment, I don't get a chance to remind everyone that you need to send me emails at this email address, mastermind@messageforce.com, to just ask me questions, and I can answer them, and I can make a segment around your questions as well. In particular, I'm looking for anyone who's got a question about their site, why it might not be ranking, how they could improve, specific questions. Don't ask me a question like how can I get page 1 on a site and don't give me any more information than that. So ask me some specific questions, I'd love to answer them. I'd also love to use your site as an example, so if you've got a specific example or question in mind, pop me an email on this email address. So without further ado, location. How is this important to good? How does hosting, or rather, what does hosting have to do with your location? Well, I'm going to start here on google.com.au. See, I'm sitting in Australia right now, so this is a localized search that I'm going to do with Google. If I search, say, and I've been using for the majority of my examples photography or wedding photography specifically. If I search wedding photographer, these are the results that would come up on Google. Google's tailoring this page based on where I'm actually physically sitting, and because I'm sitting in Melbourne in Australia somewhere, it knows to bring some results from the places pages, and it also knows to prioritize .com.au sites, or rather sites that are from Australia, because the Australia extension is .com.au. So it knows to prioritize .com.au. Here, of course, is this case where there is a .com ranking in position 2 in this space, but it somehow knew that it was in Australia. So Wollongong is a location or suburb in Sydney, Sydney, Australia. So it knows somehow, and I'll get to how it knows, that this site is actually an Australian site, and this site is also an Australian site. So the default search that you might run, you'd fairly expect that google.com.au would prioritize .com.au sites, or rather Australian websites. Now if I did the same in .ca, which might be Canada, which is Canada, and if I did a search on, say, wedding photographer, again, you'd find it's done the same thing. It's prioritized Canadian sites to turn up first. It's just prioritized Canadian sites. Now there's several factors that come into play, and the results are not all the same depending on where I'm searching for. So it actually makes a difference where my bum is actually located, right? But it's just important to understand that in principle, if you're in Australia searching for making a search, I'd like to prioritize an Australian website first, just to tailor it to my needs a bit better. So here is the glaring example of a site that is not a .com.au, but on the first page, in fact, a very nice position 2 on .com.au, despite it not being a .com.au. This is where your hosting comes into play. The question I originally posed was, how important is hosting in in determining where your site will locate? Well, if you're doing a regional search like this, or a location-based search, where you're not in the .com arena, you're playing in a .com.au or a .ca or some other extension, where the website's actually hosted, so where the server physically sits, makes a difference. And bergphotography.com's server sits in Australia. The actual physical location sits somewhere in Australia. So that's why it knows that this must be an Australian site. Right? So it'll have a higher priority to Australia based on where the server is located. So that's so picking hosting is important. You don't want to pick hosting that is in a different country if you can, especially if you want to rank in your local search engine variant. So let's talk about item number 2, which is the neighborhood. So why is good hosting important? Well, let's say I've got a site out there. I'm going to use this picture. Oh, there we are. Let's say this is a server out there, and another server, and another server, and in each one of these servers, so say server A over here has a whole bunch of sites on it which are all pornography, and not just pornography, really wrong stuff. And this server here is got a whole bunch of, say, sites on there that's got viruses on it, and this server here is all BitTorrent type sites on here as well, and they all have hack software and all sorts of really dodgy things going on the 3 servers. And it so happens that your site is hosted on, say, this one right here, right? That's not going to be a good look for your site. When Google hits it, it knows you're sitting on this cloud, this neighborhood of incredibly dodgy sites. So watching the neighborhood of where you host from makes a difference. So trying to separate your sites, especially if you've got a whole bunch of sites, being able to say, look, let's spread my eggs out. I'm going to have something on this server here, something on that server, something on this server, and something on that server. Just to spread it out a little bit makes life a little bit safer. But more importantly, picking the right servers to make sure that it's a reputable hosting provider with servers in the correct location that is unlikely to have a whole bunch of wrong stuff on it, is important to consider. So look at the cloud that you're considering on or the neighborhood that you're considering where you're hosting your server on. The third item we're going to talk about is server settings and consistency. So just to give a little idea, I wonder if it works. So what I mean by consistency in server settings, right? Let's say, for example, this is your home page, or not? No, actually, let me take that back. Let's say this is your product page, okay? And the product URL is, say, for example. And you decide that one day you're going to move and you've been building links to this page. So you've got 10,000 links coming into this page, okay? Coming into this page. And then you decide, you know what, I'm going to rename this page because products.html isn't very good. So maybe instead of products.html, you might have, say, something else in there, which might be, say, wedding photography, wedding photo products. I don't know, because that's a better URL, and you decide to rename it to that. What's common practice is to install a 3-on redirect. So to redirect from this location to here, from this location to this location, right? To put a 3-on redirect from here to here, so that all the links that you acquire at this level is not wasted and it's passed onto this new page that you've created. Now this 301 redirect, for example, once you've established it, you don't want the 301 to disappear. If you've got a good hosting provider, someone who can provide you consistent hosting quality, you can trust that once the 301 is put in place, it will always remain from this page to this page, right? That's where your 301 sits. You want to be sure that it's going to be here at all times. The problem with a lot of things like 301 hostings, any sort of mod redirects, which is mod rewrites, so reskinning the URLs and making some complex changes to how you want to host, they need to be consistent at all times. You can't have your URL changing every hour, every third day, because Google will get confused. Is it supposed to be this page, or is it supposed to be this page? So one day the 301 redirects there, and the next day it's gone. It causes a huge problem, and it can really affect your rankings. So that is another key thing to consider. So you'd be noticing also some of you are experiencing these problems, especially when you're managing huge sites, especially when you're managing with an in-house IT team. The importance of consistency in this, I cannot stress it any further. I've just got too many clients with this problem to ignore mentioning. So yeah, do consider that this is a critical thing to look after. And the final item is availability and uptime. This is probably one of the most frustrating things. If the McKayphotography.com.au website's down and Google decides to crawl while the server's down, then Google's not going to find the site anymore. It's going to think the site's disappeared. And as you can imagine, sooner or later, if your site's been hit a few times and it can't be found, Google's going to think, hold on, this site's no longer wanted. I'm not going to keep it in my index any longer. So it will actually just remove your line. It'll remove your line and your listing on Google, and until your site might be found again. Now let's say your site comes back on again. It's been down for 5 days, it's up 5 days later, you've lost some rankings. There is no guarantee that whatever rankings you had before, you're going to come back on that. Now you can fairly expect that you will recover whatever positions you've lost. Simple logic tells you that Google's surely not that stupid to know that yesterday it was position 1, so today, just because it fell off for 5 days, that it should be penalized and knocked back to page 3. Logically speaking, that does make sense, but you have to remember that a crawler is a robot, and it'll have a rule on it that may or may not trigger, that says, you know what, index it again from scratch. Forget all the history that we've got on it. Let's just start it. Let's just treat it as a brand new site and rank it again. It's not a risk that is worth taking, especially if you've done, say, 5 or 10 years worth of SEO work, and SEO is contributing 40% of your revenue. That's not a risk that's worth taking. So hosting is absolutely important. Good hosting in the right location with good consistent server management, so that whatever settings you set is always going to be there. You have confidence that it's always there, and it's got minimal downtime. Uptime in service speak is availability. So if I say I want a site to be up at all times, I'm saying I want to have a highly available website. Now in Cerebros, we've got a tool. So under the Tools tab, so if you click on the Tools tab, you'll see that we've got an availability checker there. It's a really basic way for you to add sites, right, to check, to test. And what will happen is it'll test your site every day for X amount of times a day. I'm actually not sure how often it checks it, but it checks it fairly regularly to make sure that your site is up and available to search engines. So if we ever find something's wrong with it, we pop you an email straight away, let you know, hold on, we can't get to your site, your site's missing, it's not available, you should look into it. So this is a free service with Cerebros, so do make sure you use the website availability monitor. That's under Tools, website available. Oh, we've got an inconsistency in the naming here, so this will either be renamed, or you're looking for the website availability tool, so it's on there under the tool section. Right, so I've blabbed on long enough. Have a go at that. Make sure you set up this when you get your free account, and enjoy.